And we're back. Evan, it's Dr. J. How we doing, man?
Pretty good. How you doing?
Good. I'm loving the ambiance. My new plantation shutters in the background. Just loving that there. Just nice. Ready for an excellent day. Got a little lunch break here. Seeing patients all morning. Ready to drop some knowledge bombs and then get back to patients in the afternoon. How we doing on your end?
Yes, likewise, same story. I had a female client this morning who I was telling you off air. We had run her blood work before previously, and it was basically just a checkup. I said, hey, why don't we check your thyroid? She didn't really have any hyper or hypo symptoms, and she showed up with thyroglobulin antibodies, which is one of the type of antibodies you and I test our clients for on blood, and she showed up with a level of 50. And we should see that as minimal as possible. I mean, hopefully less than 1, but she's at a 50. And she said, well, what's triggering this? And we can go into that today, but I was hoping you and I could really outline a lot of different causes and triggers of Hashimoto's because it's so common in our females. We see it every single week. It's like, well, there's different triggers for different people. So hopefully we can try to go into a couple of different arenas here and talk about the big puzzle pieces.
I like that. And then people on Facebook, we also got Evan's audio on the background too. So if you're listening on Facebook, go over, jump on YouTube, Justin Health, or youtube.com/Justin Health, and vice versa with YouTube. Get on the Facebook page so you can get these live feeds. We like to do them and do our Q&As too. So this is great. So 100%, Hashimoto's is a big issue. It affects about 30, or thyroid issues, about 30 million people in this country. I'd say a quarter are probably undiagnosed, or at least undertreated or undersupported because they're given synthetic thyroid medication that is T4, right? T4 in origin. And then you have these various enzymes called D2 and D3 that help convert and activate thyroid hormone. And the problem is those enzymes, if you have Hashimoto's, there's a good chance those D2, D3, and even D1 enzymes are not working optimally. So then that conversion of T4 to T3, that inactive thyroid hormone to active T3, about 400% increase in the metabolic activity of T3 versus T4, those enzymes aren't there for the conversion. So that's a big issue, right? And not to mention, when you take a thyroid hormone, you're getting T4, right? But you're also getting T3, right? Triiodothyronine, which is your active thyroid hormone. You're getting T2, which isn't even tested, right? T2, diiodothyronine, is a metabolically active hormone, only measured in the research setting, so not even really talked about in conventional medicine. T1, T0, calcitonin, which is very helpful for calcium metabolism. So again, we're not getting that in our conventional thyroid medication. And the big thing is those D2, D3 enzymes that you're missing that T4 to T3 conversion with. So lots of people are being medicated with thyroid hormone, right? Synthroid, Levoxyl, levothyroxine. Their TSH comes back into normal range, so they look good on their conventional doctor's thyroid test, but they still have all these thyroid symptoms, right? They have the thinning hair, the outer third of the eyebrows, swelling of the hands and feet, anxiety, mood issues, constipation, depression, and they're not getting better.
So why? What's up with these enzymes? What's happening to them?
Well, I mean, the underlying physiology typically is inflammation, right? Inflammation is what drives people into that disease or pathological state, right? And that pathological state means more symptoms, right? All the things that I just mentioned, the mood stuff, the digestive stuff, the hair loss stuff, the energy, the weight gain, all those things are going to be affected. Now, a big component, we talk about it because a lot of these issues, right, thyroid-based things are going to be autoimmune in nature. So autoimmune means your immune system is actually attacking your thyroid gland. So you have these antibodies like TPO, or thyroid peroxidase. You have antithyroglobulin antibodies, and these are primarily with Hashimoto's, for instance, and they come and they attack your thyroid gland. And that's about 90%, I'd say 50 to 90% are autoimmune in nature. So when your conventional medical doctor or your endocrinologist says, oh, here's a conventional thyroid pill, they're not actually getting to the underlying immune imbalance, right? They're not fixing the underlying things like gluten, right? Grains and gluten, and that molecular mimicry that happens where your immune system can be exacerbated because of the gluten. That's one really big component. Couple others will be the gut issues. So small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, gut bacterial imbalances, infections, H. pylori, blastocystis hominis, Lyme or Borrelia burgdorferi, Yersinia enterocolita. So those are just a lot of gut infections that can significantly affect your GI. And again, that sulfatase enzyme in the gut made by healthy bacteria really helps to activate that thyroid hormone really helps to upregulate those D2, D3 enzymes to get your T4 to T3. So all that technical jargon, what the heck does it mean? We're trying to get your active thyroid hormone up higher. That's the goal. Your T3 levels, get them up higher, because just doing it on the conventional side and saying, hey, let's give you a synthetic thyroid hormone, that may not be enough to actually get the end stage thyroid hormones better. It may make the upstage TSH look better, but not the downstream T4 and T3.
Conventional, like the National Institute of Health, they'll say that the Hashimoto's affects 1 to 2% of people in the United States. Do you agree 1 to 2%, or do you think it's much greater?
So you're saying, repeat that question one more time for me.
National Institute of Health. Are you hearing echo? Is that messing you up?
No problem. I just got a comment here. Someone saying they're not hearing the audio on the YouTube side. If you guys are hearing the audio, give me a thumbs up here, but I think we're looking good.
Okay. So National Institute of Health, they say Hashimoto's affects 1 to 2% of people in the United States. I think it's much, much higher. Isabella Wentz, I think she gave a number that was much, much higher too. What's your take on this percentage here?
Yeah, I think it could be much higher for sure. I think it could be much higher. I mean, the big issue is that most doctors, they aren't testing for thyroid antibodies. That's the major issue. We talked about a patient this morning over in Canada whose doctors aren't even testing for thyroid antibodies. And the big reason why is because, think about it, right? If the solution is a synthetic thyroid hormone like Levoxyl or Synthroid or levothyroid, right? If that's the ultimate end game, and that doesn't change whether there's autoimmunity or gluten issues or infections, then it stays the same. Why change that, right? Why change that variable up? Because they're not going to do anything different if something else comes back, right? Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Even though 90% are autoimmune in nature, right? Even though 90% of thyroid issues are autoimmune, they're not going to do anything different anyway. So why even look for it? Because then it just creates more questions that doctors have to answer, and they don't like to answer questions that they're not prepared to answer, right?
Or they're not, and they're not trained, because if antibodies do come back, they've got nothing. They've got no way to talk about Klebsiella and Citrobacter bacteria that need to be treated. And so just to give a little bit more backstory on the Canada. So, Justin and I both have clients in Canada, and they'll say, hey, we've got health insurance over here. It's free, but there's a catch to that. It's not that good. All they're going to do is they're going to run like one marker, like maybe TSH. And then based on that, they may give you a prescription drug. But if you don't have your free T3, the reverse T3, the TPO, the TG antibodies we talk about, I mean, I always use the analogy, and maybe you tell me if there's a better analogy, but mine is, if you just have TSH and you're trying to treat thyroid, it's like touching the sidewalk and estimating the forecast.
Yeah, that analogy sounds really, really familiar. I don't know.
There's no way you came up with that. I'm pretty sure
I came up with that one. That's been around for like 6 or 7 years, because that's how I teach my patients about TSH. TSH, the receptor sites on the pituitary are hypersensitive to thyroid hormone. Therefore, TSH will drop more precipitously, because the brain is sensing thyroid hormone being a lot higher than what it is. So peripherally, the thyroid hormones never gets high enough in the periphery, in the actual tissues, but it's high enough in the brain because the brain's more sensitive to thyroid hormone. So TSH will always drop faster than what the peripheral tissues need in the periphery there for thyroid hormone. That's why you don't ever want to base your dosing or your support off of the TSH 100%, because the TSH is so sensitive. Touch the sidewalk outside when it's 100 degrees out, you'll probably be able to fry an egg on it, right? But again, the air temperature will always be a lot cooler. The peripheral tissues will always be less saturated with thyroid hormone than the latter. Make sense?
Well, I'll give you the credit. It must have rubbed off on me then, if you had that one.
It did. That's mine, man. That's a Dr. J-ism. But getting back on your thing, man. Yeah, socialized medicine, for the most part, it stinks. Okay, I've seen patients from all over the world, Europe, Canada. Now, socialized medicine is great if you only need it for acute traumatic issues, right? You sprain your ankle, right? You have to go to the ER because of some reason. But outside of that, if you're getting stuck in that chronic conventional model, all you have for options are conventional drugs, right? And then number two is the waits are like 3 to 6 months to get in. Again, this is what happens. I have hundreds of patients where I've had this story literally told to me over and over and over again. And then because everything's socialized, if the government says we're not going to reimburse reimburse it, guess what happens? There's not a marketplace for it, right? There's less people go underground. Now, I do have people over in Canada that are functional medicine doctors, and they're thriving even in a sociological medicine society there, right? Even with the socialized medicine society, because people aren't getting better, even though the medicine's free, they're still going and paying a lot of functional medicine doctors. And again, we start today. Why am I hampering on this? Is because that doctor wasn't running TPO or any of the thyroid antibodies. So the socialized medicine said, nope, we are not going to test your thyroid antibodies. We deem that not appropriate. Yet this person needs to know that they have Hashimoto's so they can make changes with their immune system, with their gluten, with the gut, with a lot of the converting nutrients to help T4 and T3.
So let's go through a list. I know we could kind of like jump around, but maybe we could do like a top 5 or maybe even like a top 10.
Let's do it.
So number one, I mean, in no particular order, but number one, you already mentioned gluten. So this would include any grains, right? Because even like our amaranths, our buckwheat, our quinoa, that could still be cross-reactive and trigger the antibodies, right?
Correct. I would still stay away from all grains. Grains probably being number one trigger, partly because of the amino acid sequence in the grains is very similar to the surface proteins of the thyroid. That's number one. So
what about hemp? Are you seeing issues with hemp?
Well, I mean, that's a cross-reactive thing. So if gluten is like, if gluten is like the brother and sister, hemp's kind of like maybe the cousin, right? The second cousin once removed, so to speak. So again, it may be something that needs to be pulled out with someone on an autoimmune kind of elimination provocation diet for at least a month or two. So the grain component's really important. Got to get that out. But not just the molecular mimicry thing. There's some research looking at non-celiac gluten sensitivity where they talk about gluten, even in people that aren't really celiac or aren't even a gluten-like sensitive person, so to speak, where just taking that gluten in, they still get gastrointestinal permeability. The gut starts to get a little bit leaky, even with the fact that they aren't really gluten sensitive, so to speak. They obviously are gluten sensitive, but that it's the gut permeability that's driven by the gluten. And part of what's happening is we're getting this protein called zonulin increased, and zonulin basically unzips. So it's like I'm unbuttoning my shirt. That's zonulin, right? It unbuttons it, right? Opens that gut lining up, and then all these undigested proteins can get right through there.
So zonulin goes up in the presence of grains. We had a question in the live chat about brown rice. Absolutely, brown rice would still be in the category of grains that you would want to remove if you want to avoid Hashimoto's. I tried to justify with you for a long time, oh, I love my white rice. And you're like, man, it's just not worth it. And so I'll just do sweet potatoes now. And my skin's actually gotten better too, even though I've pulled out the rice. Yeah, man, you go back to your old YouTube videos, you had some stuff going on there, and you're like porcelain skin too. Yeah, you had some gut bugs, man. You're almost up to a runway model status, Evan. I don't know about that, but I appreciate it.
You're getting there. Good.
All right. So gluten grains,
the zonulin stuff. And then also, right, other grains still may have some gut irritating compounds, right? The lectins, some of the phytates, some of the oxalates, some of those things, which can be irritating on the gut. So really it comes down to like getting the immune system and the molecular mimicry going, but then it also has some impact on the zonulin and the leaky gut.
Okay, so you already said the immune system. So let's hit on that piece. Let's make that like our number 2 or number 3. We can measure the immune system with the Secretory IgA on the stool test that we're running on people.
Yeah.
Can we go on that number and just use Secretory IgA as our immune system, kind of our first line of defense? And if we see IgA's low, can we say, okay, you're more susceptible, or this was a trigger? Okay. Yeah,
we'll see low IgA levels. IgA is that mucosal membrane barrier. It's that first line of defense that lines the gastrointestinal tract, all your mucous membranes, your mouth, anal cavities, vaginal tract, urinary canal, everything, every little surface there. Even your eyes have IgA in the surface there. Your first line of immune defense. So when that gets weakened, typically it'll go up when there's an acute infection. You'll see it there when we run stool tests. We'll measure it in the stool, and then we'll actually see it drop down for chronic stress. So IgA is really important because that's a good measurement that your immune system is under stress.
Right. So a lot of times, more often than not, you and I are going to see chronically low IgA, indicating that someone's been dealing with issues for a long time. So chronic stress, overwork, maybe they're not sleeping as well as they could. Maybe they have gut infections that are damaging that IgA, because people may say, well, if I've got Hashimoto's, how did I get a low immune system in the first place? Well, chicken or egg, all of it. I mean, you could have had adrenal stress, which then weakened the gut. Then you picked up gut bugs, or vice versa.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
So
What's next?
Yeah, typically it's a combination of emotional stress that tends to set people up. That tends to be it. So there's, issues with whatever's happening in their life, work stress, financial stress, family stress, kid stress, whatever's happening there, that tends to set things up, and that will weaken the immune system.
I had a female client that I talked with earlier. She's a teacher, so she's on summer break right now. She's feeling much, much better. But when she's back in school, she's done. She wants to get out of the field of teaching. Everything kind of gets worse symptom-wise. So that's a good example of work stress right there.
Yeah, absolutely. And then women are a little bit more prone to it because there's actually research on this where their immune system can go out of balance. Like if you have an emotional argument with a woman, their IL-6, their interleukin-6 can go out of balance for up to 2 days after a fight. Where some of the men, they can go out of balance for like a few hours, but then it's back in. So this is part of the mechanism why women are more prone to autoimmune conditions. Their immune system is probably just a little bit more, I should say, a little more sensitive. And there's also the estrogen issue, right? Because estrogen can affect the CD4 to CD8 balance, and it can skew that balance. So the more women are estrogen dominant, that can throw off their immune system, their CD8, CD4, their natural killer cell to helper cell ratio. CD8 is your natural killer, your CD4 is your helper cell, and they can skew that ratio up.
So I'm guessing the ancestral view of why a woman's immune system would be more sensitive. Would you say just because of having children, where the immune system's got to be able to modulate itself not to attack and kill the fetus, for example? So their immune system's a little bit more variable than a man? Or what do you think the ancestral lens is?
Yeah, I think it probably has to do with just raising children and that extra level of empathy, being able to take on other people's feelings and kind of be able like, all right, what's your need, right? You got you're raising a child, right? You have to be able to really sense what's going on. I think that may play into it. I have zero evidence outside of just my opinion and just observation, but there's research and studies on that. Also, blood sugar can throw people's immune systems off too. So like skipping meals and not getting enough nutrition and just going long periods of time. So that's a big thing, right? That's a big thing. So I just, I tell people is make sure you get your communication and your relationships kind of dialed in. If you're having issues with a spouse, get the communication down. Try to create a really good environment where you can communicate and you're not going to get flooded and dry people's immune systems off.
Right.
So just kind of that's number one. Number two is don't skip meals. Right now, when you're healthier, you can play around with intermittent fasting. Okay, that's a good tool, but you got to get it dialed in where your hormones are good first and you're feeling good first, and then get that dialed in later on.
Well, how about ketosis too? Like I chatted with Dr. Mercola, and he's like concerned that a lot of people are going into a ketogenic diet, but they're doing it for too long. So he's kind of a proponent of like 5 days on and then 2 days off, where he'll just go and eat potatoes and things like that and really kind of carb refeed. So how much of this thyroid epidemic, Hashimoto's even kind of in the health space where you and I are working, these women coming to us that have triggered Hashimoto's, do you think ketogenic diet could be a trigger potentially?
Well, I think ketogenic diets actually help a lot of people with Hashimoto's, especially ones that are insulin resistant, because insulin resistance can actually block thyroid conversion. So that's my issue is if you're insulin resistant, you may do really well with a ketogenic diet for a while, but then you may hit the wall. So then the question is when you hit the wall, that's where you may start gradually increasing your carbs up, maybe 10 grams a week. And maybe you do a couple of low carb days like keto days and then come out for 1 or 2 days on the higher carb side. But I think if you're coming into this being overweight with a waist circumference greater than 35 for a female, 40 for a male, there's probably some level of insulin resistance that a ketogenic diet will help reverse. But then you may have to refine and retune your carbohydrate thresholds afterwards.
Okay. And that would always be based on adrenal health, and that would be based on maybe vitamin D status or gut infections, the presence of those. There's always more things. So when people find, ketogenic diet, it's like there's so many different variables out there in these other pieces of the puzzle.
Yeah. I mean, Atkins was sniffing around the right area when he started talking about ketogenic diets in the 70s. The problem with Atkins is he didn't put enough qualifiers on it. I mean, okay, great. So I eat a whole bunch of meat. Now, is that going to be hormone antibiotic free, laden meat, or is it going to be organic grass-fed meat? Oh, Atkins says soy protein's okay. Aspartame Splenda is okay. Right? Not good. So protein quality is really important. So if you're going to do protein powders, collagen peptides, pea protein, like maybe some really good grass-fed whey protein, right? Choose really good protein sources if it's powder, or choose really healthy meat sources or really healthy fat sources. Lots of toxins are stored in the fat. So if you're eating diseased animals, you're not going to get a high quality of a meat product passed down to you from a nutrient perspective.
Yep. Well said. Okay. So we hit the Secretory IgA, we hit the zonulin, we hit the
also, we'll talk about thyroid nodules too, right? Someone on Facebook here commented here. So thyroid nodules are just like these little abnormal tissue spots in the thyroid. They're typically going to be driven by autoimmunity, right? So Hashimoto's is going to be the major thing. Hashimoto's typically is an autoimmunity that is involving TPO antibodies and anti-thyroid globulin antibodies. Now, again, all autoimmunity for the most part will end in low thyroid. The difference is Graves' disease has a couple of antibodies that can jack up thyroid function and keep it up to the point where you may stroke or you may have an issue if left untreated. So we see that with TSI, or thyroid stimulating immunoglobulin, and also TSH receptor antibodies. So we just want to make sure it's under control. I've helped save many thyroid from going into a Graves or a thyroid storm state by using specific nutrients to help it, and also calming.
With thyroid nodules, let's say someone has antibodies at that point, maybe we suggest they go get a thyroid ultrasound. They say, okay, hey, can you palpate? Like, would you suggest an ultrasound, or can you palpate and figure out whether you have nodules?
Oh, great. So let's go into that. So how to palpate the thyroid is find the Adam's apple. So like mine's right here.
Get a little closer to the mic just so people can hear good.
Yeah, this is your Adam's apple right here, right? So I feel here, I go down about 1 centimeter and then out 1 centimeter. And, I would do it by standing behind myself if I could step out of my body, but I'd be here. And then I touch each side and I press it into the other. And I would have myself swallow water. And I would feel just for any irregularities on the surface. It'll be almost impossible to do it to yourself, just as I demonstrated with the angle. But you would stand from behind someone and you'd have just nice flat palms, and you just would go through the surface and you touch and you push, and you want to feel it come out on the other side. And basically you want to just feel a smooth surface, and you want it to not feel as inflamed and puffy. You have to feel a couple normal ones to know, but that'll give you a pretty good idea.
So ultrasound sounds easier though. I mean, let's just say that you come back with nodules. What happens? Do you just play the waiting game? You just watch them, or how do you approach it?
Yeah. I mean, it depends where you're at, right? There's always that increased chance of potential thyroid cancer, right? So it's good to get that screened because the increased risk, but it's not the first thing I worry about, because if you just do all the things that we tell you, I can't tell you how many patients whose nodules have just significantly reduced.
Yep.
So I've seen that happen so many times. So, hey, just run it by your endo, see what they say, and then just let them know that you're going to do some things on the functional medicine side and come back and monitor it. You just want to make sure it's moving in the right direction. Now, some nodules can be caused by low iodine too, but again, we tend to get enough iodine. A couple hundred mics is really all you need, like 200 mics is like the RDA. You may need a little bit more, but you got to be careful with supplementing iodine, because the iodination process that happens. So iodination is nothing more than the iodine bonding to the tyrosine molecules to make your thyroid hormone, right? Like T4 is your tyrosine, your tyrosine bound to 4 molecules of iodine. That process of binding it and pulling out the sticky glue to get everything stuck there, that's called iodination. That process spits off a lot of hydrogen peroxide, which can be inflammatory, and that can drive a lot of B cell infiltration, your immune cells, into your thyroid and to exacerbate that autoimmune attack. So you got to be careful off the bat with giving any iodine. So I always like to get in the selenium in there first, get the diet dialed in, get the lifestyle stuff dialed in, and then really lower the inflammation first before I go after it. And if we go after it, we'll titrate it up slowly. We won't go at it hard. There's a lot of docs out there that go really high on the iodine. I don't recommend going high off the bat. I think it's better off going slower and work on the foundational stuff first.
Yep. Love it. I was going to ask you a question about iodine. I forgot what it was. Darn, I lost my point. All right, well, let's keep moving on. What else comes to mind for triggers?
Yeah, so we talked about the food stuff. We talked about blood sugar. We talked about emotional stress. That's still a big one, okay? Because emotional stress taps into your sympathetic nervous system, and your sympathetic nervous system wires right down to the adrenals, and that's pumping out cortisol, pumping out adrenaline, and your body will always sacrifice sex hormones for stress hormones. It's just the hardwired adaptation, right? If you don't survive today, you're not going to have to worry about reproducing tomorrow, right?
Yep.
So that component. The gut component is very important. We talked about gut bacteria and how the healthy bacteria is really helpful with the sulfatase. Also, that's where we absorb nutrients, right? That's where we absorb a lot of our B vitamins, a lot of our minerals, a lot of our amino acids, right? Tyrosine's an amino acid that's part of making thyroid hormone. Also, 70 to 80% of your immune system is located in your gut, right? So you want to jack up your immune system, just get your gut in bad shape by not digesting food, putting a lot of inflammatory things in there, and throwing off your gut bacteria in balance with a whole bunch of steroids from the foods, antibiotics in the foods, and antibiotics in your medicines for maybe reasons that maybe be unwarranted, so to speak.
Right. Yeah. The gut's huge. I mean,
yeah.
I don't really like the term SIBO because it's so generic, but you and I, we see so many different species of bacteria. We can assume that most of them are going to be growing up from the colon to the small intestine. So if you've ever been diagnosed with SIBO or any type of bacterial overgrowth, like specifically Justin and I are going to be looking for like a Citrobacter or Klebsiella, or there's 2 species of Proteus. Those are all autoimmune trigger bacteria. That's in the literature too. So if you've got bacterial overgrowth, bacterial infections, parasites, yeast, or like we see many times, a combination. So it could be Citrobacter plus Blastocystis hominis, a parasite, plus Candida. That's a triple whammy there. That could definitely cause the antibodies to go up. The good thing is this is reversible, right? Now, would you say, I know for us, we're not medical doctors, so we can't use the term cure, but is it possible for a cure for Hashimoto's? Or when you get your antibodies down, let's say you were at a 50 on your TG antibodies and we do all the good work with you, we get the antibodies back down, let's say below a 5. Are you cured, or can you always just rebound quicker than the average person back up to that bad state of Hashimoto's again?
Yeah, I mean, you can always ramp back up, but it's all about adaptation, right? The healthier you are, the greater ability you have to adapt to stress. So when you have the susceptibility for a certain disease, so someone posted on Facebook, I have A and A antibodies. Well, that's kind of a very broad sense, but you're predisposed to certain conditions, certain diseases, maybe rheumatoid arthritis, maybe lupus, maybe scleroderma, maybe CREST, right? So a lot of autoimmune conditions you may now predisposed for. But that just means you have the genetic triggers. Those genetic switches are kind of right in the middle. And if those stressors flick it down, right, that stress could flip that gene on and it could activate. So if we manage all the things that we talked about, right, blood sugar, nutrient density, stress, grains, gut health, being infection-free, ideally, healthy probiotics, healthy gut bacteria, and then making sure that if there's thyroid damage already, we support that, making sure we support thyroid activation, right, zinc, magnesium, CoQ10, selenium, maybe the right iodine, use your functional medicine doctor as a resource, making sure all those nutrients and things are dialed in, and that's going to significantly help improve your resiliency. So if you do have a disease, you may be able to, your body may be able to keep it in check enough where the symptoms aren't even visible. Where some may say you're cured, but legally we can't say you're cured.
Right, exactly. What about the liver? What's the role of the liver in all this?
Yeah, so the liver is really important because a lot of those deiodinase enzymes, they come from the liver, right? So if the liver is really stressed and taxed, dealing with a whole bunch of fructose coming in there because you're insulin resistant, or toxins and Roundup and pesticides and a whole bunch of junk, it may not be able to do its job activating and converting thyroid hormone. So we want to make sure, number one, that we are keeping the stress off it, because a lot of liver stuff is more about just stop adding crap to the system, right? And then number two, I know Isabella Wentz talks about it in her book, The Hashimoto Protocol. She starts a lot of her patients out on a liver cleanse that first month, which can be helpful. So liver support, phase 1, phase 2, detox support. In my line, it's phase 1 is either antioxidant supreme or liver supreme. And then phase 2 is going to be detox aminos. That supports all the phase 1 and phase 2 pathways that run your liver. The fat soluble, the water soluble, and the water soluble to excretion in phase 2. That's really important.
So list off some ingredients. So this is like your methionines, your taurines, your milk thistles, your vitamin A's, your beet powder, your
Vitamin
artichoke
C,
extract.
artichoke, yeah. And then your phase 2 is going to be more of your amino acids. That's like N-acetylation, methylation, glutathione conjugation, all that stuff. So cysteine, glutamine, glycine, taurines in there, methionine. We can throw calcium to glucarate in there. Those are all really good compounds.
Cool, cool.
Excellent. So I think we hit some good triggers. We talked about some things to help with thyroid conversion too. We talked about the liver. We talked about the infections and the leaky gut. And then, yeah, the whole thing about gluten. Oh, by the way, I'll tell you off the air. All right. But
hey, let me tell you something though, before I'm going to mention two things. I believe we hit it already, but the adrenal piece, with cortisol stress, with adrenal problems, you can also impact the conversion of T4 to T3 hormone there. So you got to get your adrenals checked.
Yes. We got to hit that, man.
Yeah. So if you're working on your thyroid, but you're not working on your gut and your adrenals, your results are likely going to not be very good, because adrenal stress is going to reduce the conversion rate. And then you can go back to it. But let me say one other thing. I had a client this morning. She was trying to justify eating gluten and grains and crackers and stuff like that because her food sensitivity test.
That's exactly where I was going, man. You're reading my mind.
All right. Her food sensitivity test said, I'm not sensitive to gluten.
Yeah.
And so she's still doing gluten. I said, throw your food sensitivity test away.
Yeah. I mean, the big issue, right? Some of the non-celiac gluten sensitivity research, people that weren't even gluten sensitive, they had increased gut permeability.
Say that again, just to make sure that it's like super clear for people.
Yeah. People that weren't gluten sensitive, like they weren't like celiac, they weren't like having any gluten issues based on conventional standards. When they got exposed to gluten, they noticed some level of leaky gut, some level of permeability in the gut based on the study's objective criteria and diagnosis for it. So that means more leaky gut means more immunogenic compounds, undigested foods, LPS, casein, right? All these things, dysbiotic bacteria may get into that bloodstream and may start to cause some immune upregulation and get that immune system kind of pissed off, right? And then it may go out looking for that thyroid tissue, or maybe even the pancreas or other tissues, other autoimmune issues.
Or even if it doesn't go straight to that, the gluten could still cause the leaky gut situation, which then sets you up. So when you go to sushi night, you could go pick up blasto or some other parasite, which then causes even more damage, which then leads to the antibodies. So one way or another, you're setting yourself up. There's really just no justification for gluten in the diet. Yeah,
exactly. I won't give any press to the book that's out there right now. We've talked about it before.
Oh, it's crap.
But yeah, people say, oh, gluten, this and that, may be okay. Not necessarily okay. I don't think it's something that people should be consuming. Some people may be able to handle it. Again, if you're going to consume gluten, you're better off doing it in sourdough form if you're going to do it. Or, if you are healthier, right, and you're on the right track, every now and then you want to do a little bit of white rice as a treat, as long as you're doing good, as long as you're on point, right, then I think that's okay.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Now, there was something else. I interrupted you. I hit the adrenal piece, and I had to talk about the food sensitivity testing and the lady trying to justify gluten.
Yeah, that was it. I think we hit it. And I think just the adrenal imbalances, whether high cortisol or low. So chronic stress, low cortisol with a reverse cortisol rhythm, or acute stress, really high cortisol, both can affect your thyroid conversion and activation.
Yep. Got it. So, I mean, yes, you can take adaptogenic herbs. We promote those, but that's still not addressing the root cause. So if you hate your job, we can give you all the ashwagandha, rhodiola, Siberian ginseng in the world, and we're going to help you adapt to the stress, but you've still got to remove the stress. It's like, I know you use the analogy of the engine light, putting the tape over the check engine light on the car. I like the analogy of like a doorbell too. Like if you keep pushing the doorbell, I mean, you're still going to have issues. You can try to like disable the doorbell, but if the button's still being pressed, like you hate your job or you've got a terrible relationship. I had a woman who, she told me, she said straight up, Evan, until I divorce my husband, I will not get better. And I said, well, I fully support you in that decision. And now she's going through the divorce and she's already starting to lose weight just based on the reduction of the emotional stress. So I think that's just amazing. And unfortunately that happens, but if you want to be healthy, you got to make some tough decisions sometimes.
I agree. And I appreciate you actually giving me credit for that analogy. I thought you were going to pawn that one off on yourself again.
No, definitely not.
Good. Because I was going to give you like 2 paleo demerits for that, but I'll hold those back.
Appreciate it.
Good. You got a credit in the bank of Dr. J here. Excellent. So I think we hit everything, the cortisol stuff, we hit the gut stuff. Someone over here, I'll chime in. So someone talked about, this is functional medicine on demand. Can Candida hang around in the thyroid? Candida can create things known as acetaldehyde. Acetaldehyde can be inflammatory, right? It's like one of the byproducts of alcohol. So that can be inflammatory and really affect things. Candida can also get the immune system revved up. Candida or acetaldehyde in the gut can convert into salsolinol. Salsolinol is known to increase antibodies to receptors for dopamine in the substantia nigra, the midbrain. So that can create other issues with autoimmunity. So yeah, Candida is not a good thing either. And that's, that's according to conventional medicine, not really to exist at all, but we see it all the time.
Oh yeah. I mean, honestly, and I think I may have mentioned this if I told you this or I told people on the air already, sorry if I repeated myself. I'm sure we do that all the time, but
yeah.
When I first started learning about Candida and yeast, I thought, oh, Candida, yeast, I kind of put it on like the bottom of the totem pole below bacteria and below parasites in terms of the effect on the body. But I've seen all kind of crazy stuff with Candida alone, where it's like, whether it's brain fog, depression, fatigue, cravings. I mean, something that sounds so benign. Oh, Candida, I'm going to do a Candida cleanse. It's like, a lot of people promote it kind of like almost like it doesn't exist, or almost like it's a trendy topic and you can just do some type of like Candida cleanse smoothie, go buy my online Candida program and you're going to get better. It doesn't work that way, but Candida can affect almost every body system, whether it's adrenals, whether it's gut, whether it's mood, depression, anxiety, et cetera. It could all stem just from a yeast overgrowth. And I would say, you tell me if your stats are different on your side of clients, but for me, I've seen about 9 out of every 10 people shows up with yeast.
Yeah, and the big issue with Candida and yeast is that some people have it, but it's just the tip of the iceberg. They have other infections that may trump it, so to speak, in the hierarchy. So Candida may be an issue in some people. It can be a main issue, right? Like we'll run a stool test and we'll see like, oh, we have some Candida there. And then we'll look at another test, nothing else comes back. And then on a organic acids, we'll see D-arabinose or D-arabinitol really high. So we're like, okay, this really may be a Candida issue. And then maybe we see some clinical symptoms like seborrheic dermatitis or cradle cap, or just, dandruff. We may see some yellow discolored fingernails, maybe some white coating in the mouth, maybe some tinea versicolor rash, right? We may see some of those things that may say, hey, this may be a primary Candida issue, and we hit it hard.
You said that a bit quick. The tinea versa, what's that?
Yeah, it's like little blotches on the skin.
Okay.
It just like looks like little blotches, and it's pretty smooth to the skin. It's not really itchy. It doesn't really spread, but you want to kind of gross yourself out, just put it in the Google images and you'll see the umpteenth degree of it, but it's just gentle blotches on the skin. They tend to be a little more red and discolored.
I know sometimes people may think it's that, but it could be like keratosis pilaris instead.
Keratosis pilaris tends to be a little bit more flaky, and that tends to hit the back of the arms.
Yeah, so that's like on your triceps he's pointing to.
Like little dots back here, right? And that tends to be essential fatty acid stuff. So again, if you're having issues digesting fat, someone in our live chat said they don't break down fat well, you got to get the gut worked on, because that's a big component. Because if you're not breaking down fat well, you're probably not breaking down protein well either.
So that would mean if you're spending your hard-earned money on a good quality fish oil, then you could be potentially wasting your money, even if it's triglyceride form, if digestion's compromised. Yeah,
I mean, most underrated supplements out there, if you were to just start on 2 things, enzymes and HCl. That's it. Enzymes and HCl, get the diet, excuse me, frog got me, get the diet 100% dialed in so you can actually break down that food, put the money on the food quality, get the food quality up.
Yep. I had a lady tell me, she's like, I feel so much better by doing apple cider vinegar. I don't notice taking enzymes and HCl. And I was like, okay, you can try it, but I still think HCl and enzymes do better than just apple cider vinegar by itself.
Yeah. I mean, apple cider vinegar is a great starting point. If someone's like, oh, I don't know, I've had some bad reactions to HCl. Like, okay, great. Let's just start with a teaspoon of apple cider vinegar with food in your belly first. And then they do good. I'm like, all right, let's go to a tablespoon. Okay, let's go. You know what
I do? I make a little tonic. I'll do like apple cider vinegar. I recently got a lime or like a citrus squeezer. So I'll do like a lime or lemon and apple cider vinegar in there. And then sometimes I'll add like some vitamin C, or I'll add like that adrenal tincture I told you about. I'll add that tincture to it. And it's like a great little tonic. Yeah, I think that's great. And then typically then we do a little graduation ceremony where we go from apple cider vinegar to the HCl. That's the next step. Yep. Any comments, Evan? What do you think, man? I think we should wrap it up. I think we've hit a lot of different triggers here. And if people want to learn more, you've done plenty of videos on Hashimoto's. We've done more podcasts on this. So there's hours of more content, I'm sure, that we've created on this. So just go on justinhealth.com. You can search Hashimoto's or search thyroid. You can check out my site too, Evan Brand, and make sure you're subscribed. So if you want to join in on the conversation, we can answer your questions on the fly. And of course, if you want to work with Justin, visit his site too, justinhealth.com. You can schedule. If you want to schedule with me, same thing, evanbrand.com. And we are available. We deal with this stuff all the time. And don't take no for an answer. If somebody says, no, I'm not going to run these antibodies, then you leave. You fire them, because if you want to get to the root cause of your issue, you have to have the biomarkers. If you're guessing and checking, you're building up your supplement graveyard, you're not going to get better that way. You really got to get these numbers on a piece of paper first, because you've got to be able to track them. And we have to be able to see, okay, look, once we did this, we fixed your gut. We got the adrenal supported. Look at the antibodies, drop, 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 drop. And then eventually, hey, maybe you don't have a thyroid problem anymore. And it's totally possible. We do it all the time.
Awesome. So here's the sequence. Ready? Instead of buying crap food, you increase the food quality and you choose the right kinds of food. That's number one.
Yep.
That'll start to lower inflammation and give you more energy. As you start having more energy, you can start cutting the emotional stress out of your life. If you have issues with your spouse, work on it with your spouse. Get a book on communication. Get things fixed with your kids. Do your best to fix things at work. Whatever other stressors. All dealing with emotional stress takes energy. So most people that have a lot of emotional stress, typically they don't have the energy to deal with it. So get the energy up by just getting the food right. Then you can start to deal with the emotional stress. And then once that's kind of dialed in, you can start adding in some supplements to fast track it. First set is going to be digestive support. And then after that, you really want to work with a functional medicine doc to get everything else dialed in. But work on the foundational stuff first. And then make sure while you're doing all that, you're not causing yourself to spin around on a rabbit wheel while you're doing excessive exercise, too much CrossFit, just so you're getting drained with that. And then if you can combine in the good sleep and the good hydration, now you're set. So now when you go see a functional medicine doc, it's like, boom, you hit the ground running.
Oh man, we could have done a whole podcast just on CrossFit and thyroid issues. So maybe for a future date. But yeah, over exercise. I had a lady last week. She said she exercises CrossFit 6 or 7 times a week. She's doing CrossFit. I'm like, gosh, way too much.
CrossFit may be great if you're already healthy, if your diet's spot on, if you're resting hard, if you're doing some good things post-workout and pre-workout to recover. But if you're not there, it's not going to be the best thing for you to start off, unless your gym's got a really good on-ramp program and they get the AMRAPs dialed in where they're not doing, they have some break time in with their AMRAPs, then it's probably okay. But you got to go somewhere where there's a good on-ramp program.
But even then, even if you were optimally healthy, like you were talking about, would you still tell somebody to go do 7 days a week of CrossFit?
No, unless professional athletes do that equivalent, but they're taking naps and that's their job during the day. But the average person typically, I would say max is 4 times a week.
Working, living a life, being a parent or a spouse. It's tough.
Ideally spread it out, right? Monday, Wednesday, Friday gig, during the week, try to keep a day off in between.
Yep. Well said. You said something else in your small rant, and I forgot what it was. I was gonna ping off of it, but I guess we should wrap this thing up.
Yeah, it's funny. Like you ping me at lunchtime, let's do a podcast. All right, and then we're like, only 15 minutes, only. That's it. Like, all right, and then it's like an hour later. It's like, damn it, what happened?
I know.
We tried to be disciplined.
I know.
All right. Well, I think we hit all the good stuff on the foundational side. Is there anything you wanted to add to the foundational piece?
That's exactly what it was. Blood sugar balance. Make sure that's key. That was exactly it. Blood sugar balance, hydration. You're getting your good minerals, using your good salts, using trace minerals if you have to, trace mineral supplements if needed. Yeah. We talked about the fatty acids with the fish oil, optimizing HCl and enzymes, supporting the liver gallbladder, supporting detox pathways, supporting methylation if you have to, and looking for the root cause, getting the testing. Without the testing, you're guessing.
Love it. Excellent. All right, Evan, I'm going to go hang up here on YouTube. I'll go say goodbye to my Facebook peeps, and we will talk real soon, my man.
Take care.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.